Hey, yo, what's up, guys? We're gonna talk about special episode on the news because something major has happened. Um, uh, I am having a big no. Charlie Kirk got murked. How you feel about that, Henry?
It's definitely interesting. It's definitely interesting. It's really the first time I think somebody prominent has been killed so graphically in a way that's been distributed to basically everyone under the age of 30 in the span of like 30 minutes. And it's probably going to have very profound consequences, I feel like, because it's basically can be used as like blood libel by fascists.
The thing is, I hate to say it, but this is like our generation's more dumber version of like the assassination of JFK. Like everybody's gonna know where they were when Charlie Kirk got except it's not even somebody who was significant Charlie Kirk was twofold. I mean, he was an ideological because Turning Point USA was the biggest conservative organization in America. It was everywhere, and its goal a lot of the times was just to infiltrate universities and fight this like perceived Marxist leftist influence in universities, which like I've been watching university lectures on the Nazi government recently just for fun, and the professor is constantly bashing on Marxism, right? Marx is evil Santa Claus, and Marx was an idealist, and he inspired the Nazis. Like, this is what's getting taught in university Nazi history courses. But he founded Turning Point USA to infiltrate colleges, and like then he got God, and he was close to Netanyahu, he was close to Trump. Immediately after he gets got, conspiracy theories start flying that Trump called the hit, Netanyahu called the hit. I think it really is a defining cultural moment. It's also the first political assassination of my lifetime that I can remember. Can you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and also again, it's like with JFK, there was a video, but it wasn't like everyone. I mean, the video of Charlie Kirk getting shot is quite. I mean, it's quite close up, and it's quite memorable. I mean, for a younger person who's been on the internet for any amount of time, I'm sure you've seen graphic videos of people getting killed that are much worse, unfortunately. But for lots of people, this is just such a striking moment. In a way that the old political assassinations never really could be. It was just something in the newspaper. I think, yeah, and also I think this sort of thing's going to keep happening because the 4chan, Groyper, hyper online gaming kids, are going to stay socially isolated and desensitized to violence and obsessed with guns, and that's really what's driving all these shootings and violence in general.
I feel like this is such a culmination of just an undercurrent within American society, and it's finally a little bit of it breaking through, where we have been heading towards very violent rhetoric, very violent political content, very violent, pseudo fascist. I mean, we've been heading towards the years of lead. I will say, right on right violence, left on left violence, left on right violence, right on left violence. What Italy experienced, though, that wasn't the years of lead somewhat edged on by the CIA and Operation Gladio, or am I tripping? Do I got that wrong?
I think so, but I think also it's just like um, I mean, in the years of lead, there were real organizations, but this is just sort of like people on 4chan all day, no GF, no friends, just playing video games and going on 4chan and just losing their minds and then going and doing shit. It's not really like organizations at this point, at least.
Mm, mm. Yeah, yeah, that's true. There is no organized left. There is an organized right, but it's mostly within the mainstream. And there's like for some fringe white supremacist groups like Proud Boys and the decollected Groypers. And what I find fascinating, first of all, is that well, I think that this is such a big paradigm shift within American politics where the door has been open to political assassinations when Trump almost got in Pennsylvania. But this has cemented that political assassinations are here to stay, essentially, and that they're just a normal part of American politics now.
Yeah. I feel like also the reaction, like the Trump administration, I think expected a much more um vitriolic reaction. And as violent as so much of the rhetoric was, you notice a lot of it was coming from Gen Xers or older people who um, don't have that same kind of desensitization to violence. And I think this came into radical contact with a group of people in Generation Z who were just so embittered and radicalized and totally desensitized to the point where, people are making jokes about this all over. People are just totally detached from the sorts of political narratives that, this kind of establishment probably expected, because people are just, people kind of love this sort of thing. People think it's exciting. Young people think it's exciting. They think it's
Mhm.
fun because he's a martyr, or they think it's fun because they wanted him to die. And it's just, I think we're probably going to see more and more and more of, and the things he etched on the bullet casings too are just such a niche, obscure, weird 4chan memes, and then, of course, we also have Nepal, where all of the Gen Z people in the country just went insane and took over the country, essentially, and, are using the One Piece flag, as a symbol, and they're trying to ban that symbol in Indonesia now. I mean, across the board, it really feels like a story of a younger generation that became hyper online because of COVID, and is totally desensitized to violence, and honestly just thinks this sort of thing is really fun. Um,
Yeah, and even then, one thing I will say is that um this political violence has been completely normalized. I mean, through Generation Z, especially through how they've watched essentially a live stream genocide that Gen X really hasn't. Gen X and the boomers are getting their information about Palestine, or Sudan or whatever, Congo, mostly through mainstream news, which is, CNN, Fox News, and they don't show you the bodies, they don't show you the guts, they don't show you the dismemberment or the dead babies or the headless babies. But this is all that Generation Z has been getting 24/7 live streamed onto their social medias because it's so decentralized and hard to control that they've become desensitized to violence done by the state to an almost absurd degree. Whereas, I think for Gen X and boomers, this was genuinely a shock that the gore of it was genuinely a shock. But for most people, they've been desensitized to gore because of the actions of, America, of empire, of things that Charlie Kirk himself defended, school shootings and, well, he didn't defend school shootings, but he was always the first one to oppose any actions after a school shooting, or Israel, his lifelong defense of Israel till the end when, supposedly, according to all the conspiracy theorists, he was waning on Israel, and Israel decided to take out a hit on him. Um, the conspiracy theories immediately after his death went wild, and there's two reasons for that. First of all, Utah itself, and even the region he's in, is sort of the head of a lot of CIA, a lot of FBI. The Mormons love the FBI and CIA and all those organizations. They're the biggest recruits of that. Um, and also, because, this is such a politically charged atmosphere where people aren't even able to believe the truth anymore because the truth state narratives have essentially just become justifications for genocide. I mean, the mainstream narrative right now, if you were to believe the state, is that nothing's happening in Palestine, and every time a bomb is dropped, they were actually getting a Hamas target, and Hamas actually is dropping these bombs, or we actually got drug boats in Venezuela. So people are when the mainstream is no longer believable, which to some extent it never really was. I mean, WMDs and shit like that. People turn to conspiracy theories. They really do. And it's so easy to just immediately think that this is some sort of incitement of violence on the behest of Trump or Netanyahu.
yeah, I mean, I think, When you talk to Gen X people and when you talk to older people, they really do believe this stuff. I mean, they really believe that the people killed in Venezuela, that on that boat, they were all actually trafficking drugs. Even if they're liberals, a lot of them really think this. They actually believe that Israel is, focused on destroying Hamas. Um, because, I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but they are incapable. I mean, the divide between young Generation Z people and older people is extremely substantial in their perception of the world. And in fact, when you look at the fastest growing parts of the far right, like the Groybers and like Nick Fuentes, this is an environment. That recruitment has really been fueled by Israel. It's been fueled by Nick Fuentes because he's a Catholic integralist, basically Nazi, basically a neo-Nazi. That results in him being able to use the genocide in Gaza very effectively to say, well, this is on, Jewish people that run the world and, are kind of doing this and pulling the wool over everyone's eyes. And that's resulted in an explosion of support for Nick Fuentes amongst very young people. And then you have just general polarization. You have general kind of deep engagement with online culture that was highly unusual before. COVID, really. And so, yeah, I mean, I think all this is going to start spilling over more and more into mainstream political culture. And I think people who are middle aged and older are going to are going to be very confused by the just the amount of weirdness that's starting to spill out amongst young people because of the internet.
Among young people, especially, just killing the rich. Just statements like that have become completely mainstream. I mean, and that would have gotten you canceled or whatever, thrown off the internet or whatever a decade or two ago. But nowadays, the common sentiment amongst most young people, and I don't think they actually mean it. I really don't think they actually mean it. They're like, it is revolution of some sort, or getting your revenge on the upper echelons of society of some sort. And I think most of them are just, rad libs or liberals who are just saying this bullshit, and they really just want, I don't know, like higher taxes on the rich. I genuinely do believe that. But
But they're just very much more extreme, much more single-minded. I mean, you'll have like older people that will be like, "Well, you guys can't," or even hate, the word hate, younger people will say, "Yeah, I hate this guy." And then older people say, "Why would you say that about somebody?" You know what I mean? And it's just like, "Yeah, okay, old man, whatever." Like, and it's that attitude about political violence, about, all sorts of extreme attitudes that have really been fueled by the internet that, uh, yeah, I mean, peop older people are incapable of understanding.
and I think mainstream media is completely wholly incapable of understanding anything about this. They can't understand what a groiper is. I barely even understood what a groiper was. I will say you called it that it was a groiper before anybody else that got Kirk. What made you think it was a groiper specifically?
I mean, like, I don't know, the motivations might be I mean, the main thing is that those people are just mentally gone, that they're just totally mentally out to lunch,
Mhm.
and they're, even I wouldn't even say that it was like was his motivation that he felt like Kirk wasn't far right enough? I don't think so, I think it's just like he participated and engaged with this extreme 4chan kind of nonsense, that
Mhm.
developed just a horrible outlook on the world and mental state, and just all sorts of extreme opinions and engagement with extremely online, like far right content. I think it really is more like school shootings spilling over into political assassinations, where people don't. My understanding, at least, is that people aren't going to shoot up schools because of some political views. It's just the propagation of violence and just this kind of final inexplicable act. The fact that it's the motives are inexplicable is part of the appeal to these people. And so in that sense, he was a groyper because groypers are an outgrowth of that extremely online community, and he clearly engaged very much in 4chan and in the kind of gripper online social space. But it's really not just a far right thing. It's also just this um, internet discourse, bizarro upside down world.
One of the oddest things I found is Nick Fuentes' reaction to it because, well, actually, it's self-preservation. Because before this whole thing, like before September 10th, all Nick Fuentes could say is like Charlie Kirk is a Jew. Charlie Kirk is in service of the Jews. He's part of the Jewish shadow government. All these stupid ass anti-Semitic conspiracy theories that he was peddling. And Charlie Kirk was at the head of it. His supporters would literally go to TPUSA events on college campuses or Charlie's debate, and they would harass the guy. They'd ask him super hyper nationalist questions, super great replacement questions. They believe that Charlie Kirk was pro race replacement or what was it? What's it called? Race mixing?
Yeah, I think he's pro rate. They would say all this shit.
Yeah. Or he's pro like race mixing.
He's controlled by his log or whatever.
He's controlled by the Jews or some shit, stupid ass shit. And then the day he passes, what he says is, "This feels like a nightmare, one of the most horrific things I've ever seen. I'm absolutely gutted and devastated." Like, I can almost see
'Cause he
him.
knows, 'cause he knows it's probably, he knows, and so he wants to disavow it as quickly as possible.
Pray for Charlie Kirk's soul, his young family, and our country. Like, honestly, I don't think he actually feels this, though. He's, like, laughing the whole time he's tweeting it out, right? Like, and I think, honestly, I'm picking up some dog whistles where he's saying, like, "No, no, no, this is horrible." But actually, I feel like for his followers, they're actually hearing "Go further." No?
Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think, I don't buy the idea that Fuentes, like, wanted Char I don't think Fuentes wanted to kill Charlie Kirk. I think Charlie Kirk was just a really nice punching bag,
Mm,
and, he was a way of kind of in-group testing the far right because they could be like, "Yeah," and Charlie Kirk, he was kind of an ugly-looking guy, he's sort of weird. He's sort of a loser, basically, and, those
the
guys
man's
are,
dead and you're making fun of him?
well, but that's what, but guys like, like Nick, I think, really cares
Mm,
about the aesthetics of a leader, he looks like this strong, kind of masculine guy, and Charlie Kirk is just, sort of a pathetic student that just kind of wandered into this, like, lucrative career debating college kids, and so I think their attitude was that he's just a pathetic guy who, just, like Nick Fuentes, I think, said, like, about Matt Walsh, "You eat you work for Zog and you eat goy slop," like, it basically just a lot of it is just all about harassing people and insulting people, and
mm,
and Charlie was a great punching bag, but I definitely think, like, this was much more of a guy who just was mentally, I mean, a guy who just sort of said, "Yeah, it'd be pretty funny if I went and just did this," you know? And,
mm.
his life was sort of in shambles, no friends, no partner, just online all day on 4chan,
He was like
dropped out of
22,
college.
though. He had a chance. I mean, like, when you're
Yeah, yeah,
22,
but
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, he
Yeah.
felt like, "Yeah, why don't I just do this? It'd be badass," you know? And, like, he's embroiled in this, like, extremely negative space, so all about making fun of people, insulting people,
Mm,
just being awful, and so, like, I don't think that this is like any kind of coordinated thing, but it comes out of that environment. It comes out of that culture of isolation and just negativity and violence and hatred of other people. No real friend, no friends in real life, kind of thing. I mean, um, but I think Nick lives in fear. I think Nick lives in fear of his followers doing stuff like this in his name, and then he gets in trouble because to be a truly successful fascist, Nick would have to
mm,
gain favor by some section of the capitalist ruling class. But um, right now, Peter Thiel, and the Peter Thiel ideology and MAGA and Trumpism, that is what the capitalist ruling class supports. And the capitalist ruling class in the United States is super connected to Israel.
yeah.
So, if you think a guy like Nick Fuentes has any shot at taking over the country or getting an alliance. amongst the capitalist ruling class in these conditions. No way. It's just useful maybe for intelligence agencies or whatever to have this group of like nut jobs, essentially. Although he had over 1 million viewers on his live stream the other day, so he's definitely going to be influential. But
He's
he's
making
probably
bank off of it, honestly. He's
yeah.
good. Yeah.
But
He's
he could still get got, you know what I mean? I mean, he's been
yeah.
banned from YouTube, he's been banned from like, he's not
But
totally protected by the capitalist ruling class the way a guy like Charlie Kirk is, the way a guy like Matt Walsh or Ben Shapiro is. You know, he could still get got, and so I think he lives in fear of his followers going out and doing tons of stuff like this, so he'll always disavow, 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 because he knows he could, the CIA or whatever could come after him.
yeah, yeah. He's going right now on Twitter back and forth with Candace Owens. Candace Owens is like saying like oh, you're making it all about you, and then the first reply is somebody um replying with the R word and the N word. So that's Nick Fuentes fans for you. That's like the top
Mhm.
reply. Yeah, but
Yeah, I mean, it's
it,
ridiculous.
it is the right wing space is ridiculous.
I mean, he came out and said the other
And
day
he's
that
half Mexican. He's half Mexican. Like, what are they? What allows these people to tell other people that they're minorities and slurs and stuff? I don't know.
yeah,
Um,
he came out and was like, "What's gonna happen when me and Candace finally hate fuck?" And it turns out we're both trans. It's like, all right, man. Like, it's just such a ridiculous, ridiculous meta irony, Discord, 4chan, video gaming thing, but it's attracting tons and tons of disaffected young people because he hates Israel and because he presents himself as a very radical person. And I think it will continue to attract lots of young people, and I think it will continue to probably like, political violence will probably come out of that environment, and, I don't know, it'll be interesting to see how the capitalist ruling class reacts because it's not a disciplined, centralized fascist organization that they can really leverage, you know what I mean? It's kind of just a big collection of people who are totally bonkers. Um, so is the capitalist ruling class going to clamp down on it? And I'm sure that these conversations are going on inside the Trump administration where they're going to say, hey, this is really kind of actually a dangerous group. And they hate Trump and they hate Trump and they hate the MAGA movement. And I think over on the Marxist Leninist left, we should be glad that there's this kind of fighting involved there and that it's not a unified front because even though it's terrifying to see these kinds of hyper reactionary views being mainstreamed, um, it hopefully they'll kind of fight amongst each other a bunch and weaken each other a lot.
yeah, I mean they are infighting. My ex texted me after, and she said it's like when Al Qaeda blew up ISIS or something, like the infighting. Like she loved it.
Yeah.
Um, but what also I think immediately, like, everybody's thinking it's a conspiracy thinking a conspiracy theory. What I will say is, like, whether or not, the CIA or, I don't know, Mossad did it, they certainly are utilizing that momentum that they're getting from the right, that new momentum, because everybody on the right now feels like a victim. There's such a victimization with Charlie gone. They feel as though they were just saying, words, and suddenly, we're just saying words, we're just saying things like that, and all of a sudden we're being attacked for it. Matt Walsh literally said, I'm not going to unite with people that want me dead, right? They feel like such a victim. And Trump is trying to use that, yet he's kind of failing at it. His address last right after he was killed, he said something along the lines of the left always wants to call us Nazis. Charlie was a mater. He literally called Charlie like a mater, along those lines. And yet nobody's really buying this Reichstag fire, this attempt at a Reichstag fire, whether or not the shooting was organic or planned. Nobody was really buying this attempt to turn him into a heroic figure. Nobody's really a lot giving their consent for Trump to enroll more authoritarian policies. And so it's sort of flopping. And also, I think what's so funny is like seeing Trump cry and everything on camera about Charlie Kirk's death, and then immediately at the Yankees game, just like air pumping to like YMCA. Like he legitimately does not give a fuck that Charlie died. Like he's using him entirely for
Yeah, it is
political
crazy.
capital.
You would expect that he would care. I mean, he did know him, it's kind of insane that I mean, I feel like he'd be pretty, I don't know.
But that's the
Like,
thing though, he does
how
air
smart.
pumping, like, to YMCA and, Knicks games or Yankees games right after he dies. He does not give a fuck. Like, at least he would go into a little bit of mourning. And my conspiracy brain, you remember when everybody thought that Trump had died? You remember that? Over the long weekend? That's where my conspiracy brain is immediately going to. Like, what if he was planning this out? And that's why he's not during that, little break he took where, oh, Trump might have died. And this is the culmination of that. Like he was planning some shit out. I don't think it matters at the end of the day. I think all that matters is that Trump and Netanyahu's attempts at like utilizing this to shift American politics more right wing and take away Americans rights and monitor them, it's failing. Like it really is failing hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think one extraordinary takeaway is that, and this guy was Tyler was very experienced with guns, was, like grew up around guns, shot a lot of guns, but was ultimately just a regular guy. And it is pretty disturbing how and he hit I believe he hit a vest that Charlie Kirk had. He hit him in the chest and the fragment went up into his neck. Um and killed him. And that is scary because, you think a couple thousand people, you know, like crash out, and have that kind of ability and have access to firearms in that way. It is a scary prospect. And I think that on top of all the attempts to politically use it and stuff, there is also a scary recognition that it's a country with tons of guns, with tons of people who know how to use guns, and it's descending into, deep political divisions and conflicts, and that paints a disturbing picture, and I think that is a much more so I think also there was a kind of mainstream fear at what this really represents because, um, it's concerning stuff, really.
Mm,
I do think also, like, I don't know. I think also people have such goldfish memory, and the fact that the shooter wasn't part of any organization and was just some lone random weird guy. I
mhm,
think lots of MAGA people who were really furious kind of expected this person to be like some kind of
mhm,
liberal or something, and when once they realized that they were sort of out of their elements and they didn't really understand this sort of person and the types of things they were thinking about. I mean, the fact that he wrote, "If you read this, you are gay, LMAO." I can imagine older people reading that and just being like, "What the hell is going on here?" Um, I think that also is part of the reason why there's so much silence because there's just confusion. And in fact, now the media narrative, as soon as it's a white guy, right? The media narrative is to, how he went from a promising student to a murderer. It's like
yeah.
if this was any kind of, if this was a non-white person, if this was a woman, if this was a white woman, I mean, even it would be like just the most vitriolic hatred imaginable.
The
But it was
timeline literally is he gets shot on the 10th. On the 11th, immediately in the morning, all historically black universities in America get bombing threats or shooting threats by anonymous people.
still happen pretty frequently too normally, I should say,
Mm.
to HBCUs.
So they're all the HBCUs are closed. And immediately, I mean, he shot, and people are looking for a trans woman or a trans person or a black person or I don't know, an Arab or a Palestinian and it just turned out to be a white guy. And immediately, I think the right wing's fangs got whittled down a little bit, right? Like if they were looking for this to spark um immediate, race riots or some shit like that. I think a lot of them really were hoping for that, like Matt Walsh. I can definitely see him just sort of in his bunker, in between tweeting, like, "I'm such a victim," like, just like, his little hands, like a little rat, that I can, now use this as a justification for anti-trans riots or some dumbass shit like that. But instead, it turned out to be a white guy with politics that nobody can understand. Like nobody, anybody who touches grass, anybody who's not overly online, does not understand a Helldivers reference, a Bella Ciao Groyper's Spotify playlist reference, and a whoa, notices bulge reference. Like nobody understands that. Not even I think most young people. Only a couple weirdos, like a very select few weirdos who are overly online and on Discord and whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. I mean, the big theme of this week is just that um Gen Z has been very much shaped by the internet in ways that are um, very consequential
Mm.
and will probably be um, felt in the coming decades. I think, and especially once you talk when you think about Nepal and Indonesia, the role of young people in Kenya right now, um, it's it's pretty remarkable. I think. Um, and yeah, and I mean, also the other big piece of news is just the escalation and the spillover in the Russia-Ukraine war into Romania and into Poland, um, with drone attacks on Poland, and because Ukraine is escalating attacks on Russian infrastructure. That's a bit of a scary situation too. And then, of course, Israel attacking Qatar, and it's seemingly pissing off the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, which is it's kind of unbelievable.
I think liberalism has been really good at containing neoliberalism. Has really been good at containing during a stabilization period, especially after fall of the USSR, these two contending forces, fascism, and I can't even call it like necessarily communism, but like a sort of leftism, populism, workers movement. And it's been really good at containing these two and keeping them at bay. But as neoliberalism, I think, fails globally, these two forces are starting to fight more and more and more and more out in the open. And fascism really is rearing its ugly head in the Middle East with Israel and in those strikes that you mentioned. But also leftism and even communism itself is rearing its head in Indonesia and especially Nepal. And pivoting to Nepal, their protests against Sharma Ali have been immensely inspiring, I think, to some degree. A lot of leftists have been saying, these were sponsored by an NED and an NGO, but of course, in every single mass movement, there's multiple different actors. And I think these protests really went beyond whatever initially sparked them, the NGO. Um, and they essentially used, I mean, for crying out loud, this was an entirely internet generation. Every single protest or event had phones everywhere. Like the amount of phones recording something in Nepal was insane. It was a protest against their corrupt communist government, which basically was neoliberal and communist in name only, and they replaced them with another longtime communist, and so under the terms of anti-corruption. And so I think the internet has become a radicalizing force for younger generations, and we are going to see future revolutionary movements play out along the lines of, I don't know, like in the Libyan civil war. And the Libyan civil war was completely reactionary to overthrow Gaddafi, but all the militants were communicating on Facebook. If you know that, they would just post shit. They weren't even using the fucking DMs. I don't think Facebook had the DMs back then. They would just be posting shit like, "I'm over here now. I'm over here now. Army moving here," and I think
Yeah.
we're witnessing something very similar happening. And the internet gives us a digital infrastructure to do mass revolution. I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, the whole Arab Spring really, that was a big key part of it. And yeah, I mean, the way that the internet has been integrated into a country like the United States is far beyond anything that was in Libya in, 2011. So, um, there's all kinds and the understanding of all these different sites. And I think Nepal too shows, they tried to ban all social media. And, and now the ruling class knows what happens when you try to do that. That's not a that's no way out. And I mean the ruling class is always in a reactive position, trying to contain the will of the masses, but technological changes like that will put them on the back foot.
Mm. I think one issue with the left, or at least communist analysis, is that they think that fascists and the ruling classes often march step in step, when in fact, fascists are just an aspect of a political ideology that the ruling class will only accept when they're really desperate. Like, they don't necessarily like fascists, like, nobody really necessarily in the ruling echelons of Germany or Italy liked Mussolini or Hitler. They were forced to accept them just out of fear of communist movement or workers movement or really well organized workers movements. And
Yeah.
in
But,
America,
I mean, it is sort of fun that, like, I think in Italy and in Germany, they like them a lot more than they do in the United States today because they didn't really know, they thought they could be controlled a lot more.
yeah.
And they didn't know, I mean, like, the the Holocaust, I think, definitely did have an impact on the capitalist ruling class. And I think when you see people like Ray Dalio come out and also even before that, I mean, FDR basically served the same role as the fascist Nazis in Germany
Mm.
in the sense that FDR was charged with saving the capitalist system. And FDR was really backed by the financiers and the banking class and people who I would argue are just much more thoughtful and technocratic capitalists, whereas the industrialists like Henry Ford and the steel industry, so on and so forth, they supported fascism. And I think in the United States, you have this tension between between tech capital and people like Peter Thiel, who think they've kind of synthesized a new sort of fascism, and people like Ray Dalio who are financiers who, frankly, are just much more just much smart they're just smarter people, they're more knowledgeable, they understand, like, the ramifications of just throwing everyone into a hyper militarized autocracy, and they're much more cautious and concerned about the possibility of fascism. Um But, then again, like, these ideas are out there, and I still think Nick Fuentes definitely gets money from some capitalists. I mean, from a certain section of them who are ideologically motivated.
Oh, yeah, yeah, the American ruling class really wants to hold on to liberalism. It's not very accepting of fascism. Whereas, like, yeah, the German industrialists did back Hitler, partly. Um, yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. It's such a, but I do think that this is such a watershed moment in American politics. I mean, we're never you never return from, I mean, in Pennsylvania, you saw political assassinations being brought back with the attempt on Trump, but now that there's one successful one, there's no turning back. I mean, these are here to stay from now on, and who knows who's gonna get got next? I'm assuming somebody on the left-ish, like Bernie Sanders or Hassan, maybe? Hope not Hassan.
I don't know, I feel like it's, like, a really, it's funny, though, because it's almost I feel like still more likely to be a right-wing MAGA person because I don't know. I've never, I've never ever thought about killing someone, but I think you can imagine that you kind of have to have some sort of intimate connection to them. Like I'm sure this guy was in a space online where Charlie Kirk was a regular subject of conversation, and Charlie Kirk was scrutinized and analyzed, and so you kind of have to develop this interest in Charlie Kirk as a person, and I don't know that that actually occurs across partisan lines as much as we might think. Are the Groypers talking about? I mean, the Groypers talk about Gavin Newsom because they love Gavin Newsom and they ironically love him. You know, are they talking about Bernie Sanders? Are they talking about AOC, Ilhan Omar? Are they talking about how much they hate them? Not really, not nearly to the same extent you'd think. And so I don't know. I mean, it's possible that a MAGA person, like an older MAGA person, might crash out and do something like that. And I mean, we saw that with the Minnesota State governor, or excuse me, Minnesota State senators were attacked, and Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi, who was attacked. Like, I guess maybe that demographic could. But I don't know. It is really awfully poetic though that there's been such a terrible mass shooting problem in this country and such a terrible school shooting problem, and politicians basically across the board dismissed this and did nothing. And now it's bleeding into political violence, and they're saying, "Where is this guy?" This has to be because of his political views or because they don't like, because they're this party or that party, but it's really just this nihilism and violence spilling out all over, and I'm sure it'll induce copycats because, it's just a way to get your name, it's just a I don't know, it makes sense in these people's minds for some reason.
Yeah, yeah. Also, we completely forgot about Luigi. We were saying we don't remember any political assassinations, but
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Brian Thompson was not necessarily a politician. Um, yeah, I mean, and also I think the liberal response itself has been very telling to some degree. And I mean, okay, when Dean Withers cried on camera, to some extent, I understand it. I believe he did have a personal connection with Charlie Kirk, like he had debated him before. And so I don't know, to see somebody that you knew personally to some extent, even if they were your enemy, or you met somebody personally die, I mean, in such a horrific way, I think that would induce it. But, of course, he's landing himself in hot water because he cried on camera. He said, "Anybody who celebrates this should not be doing it." And, a lot of people who are, minorities, a lot of people who are gay, who felt antagonized their whole lives and their lives threatened by Charlie Kirk, are saying, "You have no right to, say that whatsoever. You have no right to tell us how to feel." And it's to a point where, like, I've watched a couple of interviews of, American soldiers on the front, right, against Nazis. And there was one who that particularly struck out to me, and he got ambushed by a 16-year-old Nazi while he was sleeping in Germany, and he cried. He cried over having to kill the kid. And I think we can recognize the humanity in fascists or enemies, but also, I mean, when violence happens against them, I don't know. I just sort of take a sort of approach.
Yeah, and you also, like, Dean Withers didn't kill Charlie Kirk, and Charlie Kirk wasn't 16 years old, So,
Oh, yeah, that's
I
true.
mean, it's
Oh,
like
yeah, that's
I
true.
mean,
That's nothing like the soldier killing the 16-year-old kid, that's true.
I feel like the problem is they just think this is all a game, They just think it's a game, they think it's all about ideas, but it has to do with the real people's lives. It has to do with the way everything in the whole world is run,
Mm,
and, um, it should be taken, and it is really life or death. It is life or death. Politics is, whether it's electoralism, whether it's whatever it is, it has to do with everyone's life.
mm,
And so I think it just displayed like a juvenile detachment from what what this is all really, what politics is all really about. And it's not about debating pro-life and pro-choice on TikTok Live. It's just not. It shouldn't come as any surprise, I think. Um, but that said, like I do think that it's very self-destructive to delight in other people's suffering, um, because and because they're bad people, or because you think they had it coming or whatever. Like, and I think you can make very, very compelling profile of Charlie, that he was someone who spent his life spreading hate about other people, and that resulted in violence and destruction of other people. But
Turning Point USA used to literally dox professors that they deemed
yeah,
left wing, yeah, like, as an official
yeah. I mean, I
organization,
mean,
yeah.
and that is his legacy. All fundamentally, is a legacy of hate, agitation, reactionary agitation, and disdain for other human beings. So that's certainly true. But I think you don't want to. It just is something that hurts you, I think, I think indifference is the best response because, if you're just sort of relishing in, like, schadenfreude or, like, the suffering of others, it becomes a dehumanizing thing, like, even if, I mean, imagine if you, again, like that guy, like, fighting Nazis on the Eastern Front, I mean, there's really any satisfaction in, like, killing those people or fighting, like, you can say, well, yes, it has to be done because it's a war and so on, but if you delight in it, if you delight in it in a certain way, it does become self-destructive. It's and it makes you just sort of makes it harder for you to engage productively and actually really do things actively or it chips away at your mental health. Um, and so from that perspective, I can understand people saying like, you shouldn't like celebrate the death of other people, but it's just a purely practical standpoint. I mean, if anyone is celebrating your death, you did something, you probably treated some people poorly. It's not to say anyone does or doesn't deserve death. We all die. So I guess in that sense, we all deserve it. But uh, it's it's been interesting to see those reactions. And I mean, I think it speaks to just a serious desensitization of towards violence and death in general, driven partially by the genocide in Gaza that so many people are just making jokes, and also the way that George Floyd was insulted. Um, and George Floyd, after he was murdered, was made fun of by lots of white people and many people who were fans of Charlie Kirk, was insulted and made fun of. Um,
Um,
and so people feel like they're getting back.
That's the thing though, like whenever a minority dies, like a Palestinian or a black person, they have to be the perfect victim. I mean, I think that's been talked about so many times. Palestinians have especially been bringing it up. Like we can't be anti-Semitic, we can't say anything even bad, we can't be hateful, we can't be that angry. And if we are, and they catch anything, like even anything that was like slightly hinting at anti-Semitism or too much anger towards Jews in general, even though y their anger is directed towards Israelis, not Jews in general. But if anybody catches that, their deaths are completely disqualified. And then meanwhile, Charlie was completely revived on the mainstream left, which is really, liberalism. But he was revived as a figure, washed of like all sins, immediately by almost anybody mainstream. But George Floyd was never given that. George Floyd had to be the perfect victim. He couldn't have a felony, and he was a drug addict, and things like that. It's genuinely infuriating, I think, for many young people of color to see, and gay people and trans people to see, trans people's deaths disparaged and, black people's deaths disparaged and Palestinians constantly covering their screens, their bodies, in the most horrific, grotesque ways. And then suddenly, immediately, every single liberal rushing out to say, Charlie was a good man. Charlie was a good man. Charlie was a good man. As if,
This is a
never
bridge far. Yeah.
yeah, this is a bridge too far. As if, um, holy shit. Okay, the guy who threw the shoe at George Bush is making fun of Charlie on Twitter now. That's funny. Um, what a legend. Mutadar al-Zadi. Mutar al-Zadi. Um, it's like violence. I wrote a Substack article immediately after what happened, and I just talked about in it how violence from the ruling echelons of class society is always seen as normal, and any violence from bottom up is seen as abhorrent and the worst thing ever. And I think really a lot of liberals are falling into that trap where it's like impossible for them to see anything about class society like homelessness or racism or genocide as legitimately a violence with a crime, a perpetrator, a person who is doing a crime. It was just the system and some kind of naturalistic thing happening. And violence back is seen as the worst thing ever. I mean, it's a very common trap that they fall into.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, I think, yeah, and I think like relishing in violence itself is a self-destructive thing, no matter what. And I do think that like, um, indifference is the best because and analysis and kind of calculating because um you can certainly like you can see plenty of examples in history of like that kind of bottom up violence being relished in as a way of kind of organizing a movement, and it just results in people basically crashing out and just kind of turning into nothing. um and I think like movements have to be constructive fundamentally. Um, but that's just me. Maybe I'm just like a class enemy.
Um, I don't know. It's hard. The entire conversation I think is hard. I mean, I can't say I was very disciplined when he passed. I was sharing.
Mean people, meaning
No, no, neither of us were. We were sharing the memes. That is the thing also I wanna talk about is, immediately upon his death, the memes were out. Not even a minute after he got hit. Everybody started making memes about it. This is such a nihilistic, laughing at culture. I cannot imagine what would have happened if Gen Z was around during 9/11. I mean, who could imagine the kinds of memes that would be coming out then? Um, it's just insane. I mean, taking back at it, and I can't really say I'm bigger or moral because I was sharing some of those memes. I was in fact accepting all the Twitter or Instagram collabs for the meme collections, because a bunch of leftist communist accounts always tag me, and I always accept them just for the hell of it. Um, but I I mean, I genuinely, Pearl Harbor could not have happened in this generation without, or JFK's assassination or anything without, instantly the internet being filled with, laughing about it and hysterics about it. I don't know. I don't know. It's such an odd culture that we live in. It's such an odd time that we live in general. And I think mostly it is fueled just by how the Gaza genocide and global genocides that America is backing have just turned the human body into nothing, death into nothing. Death is basically something that's easy to forgo because bodies are meaningless now up to the ruling classes. That's the message that they've sent. I can kill a baby and it doesn't matter. That's the message that all ruling class society is sending us right now.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, and I think, like, um, yeah, everything is basically, yeah, memeified. I mean, Charlie Kirk is just gonna become like his death is gonna become like a reference to like some video game kill mechanic, like it's just gonna be like some meme basically. And it's pretty unbelievable, and but I think like um yeah, it's certainly like, I mean, it's a concerning detachment from like it's a concerning, like, amount of desensitization to violence, but it's also totally expected. I mean, and think like, Malcolm X, when he was asked about, um, the, like, riots in, I believe it was in Harlem, in New York, he said like, "Well, I don't think, anyone who's surprised by this has any idea what it's like in these communities." And I think that tends to be the case whenever shocking violence occurs. Um, it makes perfect sense that people are so desensitized to violence, and so um, that this is just sort of a fun thing to them. They just don't care.
Um,
Um,
Not only desensitization, but also, I mean, Malcolm X, when JFK passed, he said, like, JFK set up an atmosphere of violence. And what did he say immediately after that? The chickens have come home to roost. And he got so much pushback. That was some of Malcolm X's last lines.
Mhm.
Immediately before his death, he died very shortly after that. He was killed very shortly after that. And that is like, I don't know, like, recently I found myself in a weird space online. It's a funeral director. She's a funeral director on Instagram, and she makes a lot of posts, and she mostly serves a black community. And every single person who's dead, in that funeral director's Instagram page is so fucking young, right? I never see an old person in a casket, on this page. It's always teenagers, 20s, 25s, 30-year-olds. And so violence is very alive and well within minority communities. This kind of violence is only really shocking to, I think, white America, and especially bourgeois mouthpiece white America, that Charlie represented.
Yeah, and then also like then the role of the internet is like an additional uh like space which kind of delineates that too, and younger people who are more online are much more desensitized to violence.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, you definitely see older people, like, just so shocked at this, and it's like, well, it's not that disturbing of a video, really, you know?
Yeah.
The younger you people online at all.
Yeah, do you think, if cable news actually showed, like, the gore from Palestine, things would fundamentally change, or
Yeah, definitely.
really? It's almost like a thing
Well,
where
I
it's
mean, it just I mean, you can see, like, where that sort of thing is shown, like, it definitely provokes, like, a very visceral response, you know? I mean, I don't know, I mean, it's difficult to imagine that it wouldn't impact people. I mean, people's perceptions are totally different from the reality. I mean, people public opinion would change for sure. I mean, and, like, think about the way that, like, the starvation in Biafra, you know, in Nigeria was shaped by, like, the images of the children or the girl running away from the napalm, like, shaped American opinions of the Vietnam War, you know, this is, like, on a much bigger scale. I mean, I think images have a lot of power and a lot of, like, humanizing potential. But then again, you know, it's another level of dehumanization that Palestinians are expected to show pictures of their dead babies for anyone to care about a genocide.
Yeah, yeah, and I think visibility is the biggest issue with older, especially the older generation, in that they have, and especially like Fox News and CNN are such controlled echo chambers. Well, the internet is also its own very much more radical echo chamber. I think there's two dynamics going on here, where one pushes people into more of like the mainstream ruling class view, and the other one is an extreme view that the ruling class does not appreciate whatsoever. Um, I don't know where America is going immediately following this. I think, honestly, there's a lot of momentum and energy right now. There's white supremacist rallies happening all over America, but I think this energy fizzles out very quickly. There's no, like you said, there's no organized Nazi NDSAP youth wing or whatever. There's maybe like Proud Boys or something, but Proud Boys itself has been in shambles since one of their directors turned out to be FBI. Um,
Yeah.
which was funny. But and also the Republican Party is such a good absorbing force of a lot of this energy, and it's good at redirecting that into what the ruling classes want, just traditional politics.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, same with the Democrats.
Mhm. Um, what one thing I do find funny is Ben Shapiro, immediately after Charlie Kirk's death, he goes up there and he says, "I will carry on his legacy." And immediately the right wing turns to him and they're like, "This is a Jew who believes that Jesus is in hell. He is not going to carry this Christian man's legacy." Like the way that the right is eating itself over this, I think is kind of delicious in some way. Not that like, um, I'm
No, I agree. It's
anti-Semitic.
pretty awesome.
You think it's awesome that they're being like super anti-Semitic towards Ben Shapiro
No, 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 no. But it's like it's good that there's this division, you know, that's debilitating.
amongst them? Yeah, yeah, especially the Israel issue. I feel like the Israel issue is also eating the right wing, the mainstream right wing, as much as it is eating the mainstream Democrats, right?
Yeah, and especially it's a huge youth problem, and,
Yeah.
yeah, and the Republicans have all sorts of infrastructure and a lot of mechanisms to try to get the youth vote, and they're running in I mean, they're really running into this. The liberals just think I think they still take the youth vote for granted, or they think that if they give, like, enough money to Dean Withers, you know, he'll make everyone a liberal, but, I mean, I think it's a pretty, they're I'm sure they're talking about it. But again, the American ruling class is so wedded to Israel. You know, it's a pet project of the American ruling class in some ways. So they're never ever going to let anti-Israel sentiment into the mainstream of the party anytime soon. And certainly not under Trump. I mean, Trump is, you know, basically doing whatever. You know, it'll be really interesting to see, given the Israeli strike on Qatar, it's really interesting to see what the Trump administration will do because the Trump family personally has such deep connections to Qatar in the form of tons of investments. And, you know, they, of course, gave him that airplane. And so Trump has a very deep connection to Qatar and a very deep connection to Israel. So what is that going to look like? You know, how is that contradiction going to play out? But the more
Probably Israel, right? Israel's gonna come out on top.
I agree, but
Yeah.
it'll still be a tough pill to swallow to
Mm,
if they're forced to turn against Qatar. And the more the fascist right and the Trump administration is bogged down by these types of contradictions and decisions that they're forced to make, the better for us because it's just going to make them look more and more incompetent. The economy is, about to explode, ostensibly, and so
mm,
I think, um, I think the more stuff like this happens, the better. And I think the Groyper movement is ultimately probably like a positive thing because they'll never gain the favor. At least I think, maybe I'm totally wrong, but I think they'll never gain the favor of the American ruling class because of Israel, which is again their key issue in the amongst the Groypers. Their key issue is Israel. They'll never gain the approval of the American ruling class, and for that reason, they'll be um, constantly in conflict with the MAGA movement and with the Republican administration, and that's going to bog them down and weaken them more and more and more and more.
mm, mm. And also, I don't know. In order to be have a for successful right wing coup, or anything of that sort, you actually have to be able to go outside and talk to people and touch grass and have social skills. And I think the Groiper section of the population is very much lacking that. Sure, they can do these bombastic events, which are very individualistic, where they eliminate Charlie Kirk. But doing that on like a scale where they're able to actually foment a party and take over a government, I don't think they are competent. I don't think they're competent nearly enough to be able to do that. Also, I found the tweet that I was referencing. It's by Joel Webon. He says, Ben Shapiro is not a Christian. He believes Jesus is in hell. He can never fill Charlie's shoes. And he also said, I believe we should baptize the killer. He is now my brother in Christ. Bring water and rope, baptize him, then hang him. So I think this represents the more mainstream Christian right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's pretty bonkers.
Yeah.
I,
I
I,
don't
I mean, I think it's like I think the Republican Party is coming, and the voters are coming to terms with the fact that the Trump administration will not make things better for them.
Mm,
And that the only way they could admit defeat basically and just kind of become, I guess, left wingers, but that would involve giving up all the reactionary beliefs. So they're not going to do that. And what they're going to do is say, well, it makes sense. It's because the Jews are running everything.
mm,
And then they'll like Nick Fuentes, basically. But then, I mean, like some people think, it's kind of like theater, and Trump is going to sort of choose Nick Fuentes and choose the Groyper movement and choose the five percenters and all of these fascist militias, and and turn against the so-called deep state and turn against Tulsi Gabbard and Marco Rubio and all these people later on in his um administration, and then consolidate his power. Like, is he going to do that? Again, is he going to cut ties completely with Israel? I can't imagine that. And also I think the Israeli intelligence community would make serious efforts to assassinate Trump if he would try to do something like that. I mean, they would become so desperate. But I
That's
don't
the
know. I
thing,
mean,
though.
I'd have a real headache if I were Trump right now.
That's the thing, though. Trump has really good political instincts, and he's able to like play these sides off of each other very well. Like he's been able to perfectly balance the anti-Semites who hate Israel part of the right so far, and also the more Christian Zionist right within his base. And I think he can manage to. I mean, he only has to stay in office for 3 more years, give or take. In a couple months, it'll have been a year. Of him being in office, he only has to balance it out for 3 more years without it necessarily coming to a break under him. You know,
Mhm.
so, I don't know, he might pull it off. He's really good at aligning himself with whatever whoever he needs to stay in power. Um,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. It'll probably come at the expense of a guy like Nick Fuentes, though. That's the case because that movement's growing so fast. Um, like it's only gonna get harder and harder. And again, the economy is about to go to shit. And he's about to take, force the Fed to lower interest rates to deal with the debt problem and to borrow tons of money, and that's gonna cause tons and tons of inflation. Maybe 20-30% inflation even, especially combined with the tariffs. So, you know, then you're talking about a much more, a recession, shrinking GDP, much more pressure on Trump, like, um, from the base, from other sections of the capitalist ruling class, from a grassroots anti-fascist movement, from, maybe some left-wing groups. Um, we're going to be involved in a war against Iran, in the next 2 weeks. So if we're going to be involved in a war against Iran in the next 2 weeks, you know, you're already talking about the calculation looking totally different within a month. So then, what the hell's going to happen then? I don't know.
That's the thing. Nick Fuentes is definitely, I think Nick Fuentes, and he is apologizing so hard right now. He's saying if you take up arms, you're no follower of mine. That he's a believer in Christ and people should be filled with love. He is sensing that he is completely fucked. This might be the end of his movement to some degree, getting kicked out of the mainstream right wing, because the mainstream right wing was to some extent marginally accepting of him. I do believe so. At least, they were able to pressure at least Nick Fuentes like people, at least white replacement theory into mainstream conservative politics. Um, and even Charlie Kirk towards the end of his life, Charlie Kirk was not always the biggest fan of he was racist, but he was not always the biggest fan of great replacement theory. He started implementing great replacement theory into his talking points.
Yeah. Yeah, I think also, like, I mean, at the same time, Charlie Kirk getting killed has been a huge, great thing for Nick Fuentes because tons of people are now interested in right-wing politics, who were apolitical previously. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Well, Nick will probably moderate his views like as he gains popularity, but yeah, I don't know. It's going to be certainly quite interesting. Um and then yeah, I mean, I think things are just going to start happening very, very quickly. That's what it
Yeah.
feels like.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, I think the Gen Z protests in Indonesia and Nepal were so inspiring for all of us. And Nepal does have a good section of its population that's pro-monarchist, and they were having rallies before the Gen Z protest. But, what scares me, I think, is that America, is not nearly that balanced towards the left in the general population, even amongst Gen Z. I can't really place, like, figures, but, like, if a revolution happened, like, at least 30-40 would be on the Nick Groyper, I don't know, fascist side, or maybe even 20-10, but still, it's a significant amount where, it scares me, for any, future movement. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't know, there's just such a, that's the thing I will say, and I said it in my live stream before, that I've also uploaded, one of the few live streams that was actually uploadable, that American culture is so fucking stupid because our entire politics is decided either by the algorithm, like what YouTube recommends you or what, Instagram recommends you, or
Mhm.
what stupid fucking video game you play, like whether or not you play like Final Fantasy or fucking Harvest Moon on the GameCube, which radically decides whether you end up as a Nazi or not, right? Like the movies that you watch. That's the thing about American culture. Like we are so unserious. Like if you ask it on Nepali, what radicalized you? Oh man, being born to a family that was living on the streets and seeing rich people drive by limos. You ask an American what radicalized you? I played Final Fantasy 5 and I killed Sephiroth, and it really got me into right wing politics. Like it's the stupidity of American politics. Really, it really is. It's so cultural and unserious.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And just like, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just it's definitely going to heat up a lot. And I don't know. I mean, there's really no, um, in general, like I feel like there's going to be social unrest, and it's probably going to be very decentralized
Mm.
and very much, and any organizations will form in the process of that, as opposed to initiating it. Because, yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, the country's coming under serious pressure internationally. There's a looming economic crisis. There's potentially a sovereign debt crisis, going down the line. And I mean, there's talk of England and France getting IMF bailouts. Um, it's a pretty dire situation, and the war with Russia is only escalating. Israel is crashing out more and more and more and more. I mean, Israel seems to be in a destructive spiral, it's
A million
attacking
jobs were removed from the jobs report.
yeah, it's like a million jobs removed from a jobs report. And then, yeah, just so I don't know. I think all of these forces are going to interact and produce all kinds of crazy stuff for us to talk about down the line because um,
Yeah, yeah, we're
as we,
accelerationists because it
yeah,
gives us content, you know? A
exactly,
lot more
yeah.
content. Yeah, 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 yeah. We're
We're
I
fifth positionist or fifth
this
positionist.
position. Yeah, yeah. I fully support Farage coming to power in the UK and who's the racist in who's the racist lady? Lamela Chone? Yeah, I support her. No, no, it wasn't.
Mélenchon is the good guy.
Yeah,
I mean,
Melachon is a
look,
super left guy. Who's the racist?
well, he's like okay, but it's God,
Melachon literally defends Robespierre. So I don't know.
Marie Le
He's
Pen.
Le Pen. Yeah, yeah. Le Pen coming to power in France. And because if Farage, Le Pen, and Trump get to power globally on the stage all at the same time, we get a lot more content. We get a lot more content for our podcast. So
It's true.
yeah.
That will be true.
So if
I
you're in
think that
Britain or France, vote for them, please. For
yeah.
us. Yeah. Um,
And then what else? I mean, that's really Indonesia. I mean, that's really it, I guess. What else are we not thinking of?
Germany announcing they might do austerity because America's no longer funding NATO as heavily. So
Mm,
that's definitely going to accelerate the world. I feel like like the second Germans get thrown up, welfare is the only things that keeps those orcs from becoming Nazis. Like Germans, all the Germanics, the welfare. The second they get rid of like their social security or whatever, they go manic. Like I
yeah, the
100%
disease
believe that.
activates.
I 100% believe that they're gonna become Nazis the second they get rid of their welfare.
It is true. Oh, the South Korea. The workers at the Hyundai plant in Georgia. I guess South Korea is now extremely pissed off at the United States because the fascist paramilitary just arrested 300 people.
Yeah, yeah, and the interesting thing is it's a battery plant, a Hyundai battery plant for electric vehicles, and Tesla's not doing so hot globally in the electric car vehicle market. They're being beaten out by BYD in Europe. And so and Tesla even got America to put sanctions onto no sanctions, tariffs onto BYD so that those cars are unsellable in America. So it really seems like, even though that this was the largest investment from by a foreign company in Georgia's history and was going to create hundreds of jobs, this arrest of 300 Korean workers who were here legally on, I think like a green card permit or something, whatever.
Well, no, it's like they get a tourist visa because it takes too long to get a working permit. So they get a tourist visa and then work
Yeah.
as it technically is illegal, but companies do it all the time because uh that's the only way they can really do business and make a foreign investment. And so in the past, the government has basically just looked the other way, but they just decided, fuck it. And how about we just accelerate the destruction of the economy?
Yeah, yeah, but I think it really is. I think the biggest class aspect was just Tesla and them trying to protect their manufacturing, to some
Mhm.
extent. Either that or it was just completely just a blunder on Trump's end, and he just was racist, or
Yeah,
some ICE official
100%.
was all like, "Oh, Koreans, let's go arrest those Koreans. They're basically Chinese, and then they just came
Mhm.
over there and
Yeah,
arrested them. Korea, right next to China, they're basically CCP, whatever, drones or
yeah.
whatever.
Maybe they're North Korean.
Maybe they're North Korean, like, yeah, like, oh, and then
No,
one
no,
more,
I think it's definitely I mean, probably a lot of reasons, but yeah, definitely it's a sign of just, like, absolute desperation and, pretty dire circumstances, for country.
they must have been racist. Hella, I don't know. But oh yeah, one more thing. ICE has shot a man, Silvero Gonzalez, within Chicago, and the killing is horrific. He was in his car, and what ICE officially is stating is that he zoomed away and he swerved into another ICE officer, and so they decided to open fire on him. But ICE has not released body cam testimony, or body cam recordings, and local politicians are asking for a play-by-play of what happened, because their stories are not being corroborated that well. And also, everybody who knew Silvero said that he was a nice guy and he would never have done that. So I don't know. We're just getting extrajudicial killings, basically legal extrajudicial killings. I mean, that's the thing. This country is devolving into politics from the top, violence from the top down so easily. I don't know why, to some extent, everybody is acting so surprised that it came from the bottom up, or unless it is some sort of play that they're doing, like fake outrage.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it definitely should come as no real surprise, and, um, yeah, it's pretty, and now, I mean, of course, they're saying they're going to basically invade Memphis. I don't think you need to be a genius to figure out why Memphis might be targeted by, the fascist administration.
Historically
Um,
black community.
yeah, yeah, I mean,
Oh, okay.
and I mean, just it is pretty remarkable and transparent just how racist these moves have been by ICE, targeting places that are perceived as, um, being full of, gangs that are black and, kind of conjuring up this suburban, sensibility about big cities and black people. So it's, pretty absurd.
Yeah, yeah, and also the Supreme Court now allowed racial profiling, um, openly. They're allowed to arrest people if they speak Spanish or seem foreign, which is, it's honestly, in our conversation with Gerald Horn, he mentioned like civil rights was sort of like a breakthrough, mostly due to Cold War pressures from the Soviet bloc. And I think immediately, like if you study civil rights, the second that the 1964 Civil Rights Bill passed, they were trying to dismantle it, and slowly but surely, I think they've succeeded. Just bit by bit by bit, dismantling every single aspect of civil rights back to where racial profiling is on the table again.
Yeah. Yep. And, yeah, I mean, I'm sure this week is probably gonna be even more insane and probably more confounding, and then it'll just keep getting more ridiculous because the material conditions are deteriorating and, yeah, things are definitely happening.
The thing is, though, to some extent, I can't even draw it to material conditions because I mean, I live in a nice community, and just down the street, there's a very nice gated community with like very rich people, much richer than me, or my family could ever dream of. They're like doctors and pharmacists, and sometimes I'll take my dog on a walk there, and it's so fancy. They've got their own golf course, right? And I've noticed like Trump flag after Trump flag after Trump flag, where you didn't used to be, and it's like even the most comfortable people under capitalism who I don't think have had their material conditions change whatsoever. These doctors, these lawyers, these professors, they're starting to become a lot more reactionary too, to a degree that I don't think really corresponds to their material conditions failing. Um, so I don't know. It's as much as I think for us Marxists, it should be like an easy answer for on an individual level why somebody becomes reactionary. Their pay gets less. I also just think ideologically the country is slipping to a large degree.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, yeah, I mean, it's definitely just, but I mean, class struggle is intensifying, I guess, is more specifically what I mean. Um, because class struggle is intensifying, um, you just have more violence, more chaos, and then the West in general, economically is in crisis, and that's manifesting in huge escalations in the war in Europe and uh, in Israel, and yeah, I mean that's probably just going to continue.
Yep, yep. Well, let's wrap it up. I think that's all the news. Other than that, unless you can think of something last minute.
No, I don't think so. I mean, there's so
Sure.
much that happens, though. I mean, it's just like, I mean,
Yeah, we've been eating good. I feel like our news podcast episodes have been eating good. I feel like because every single week is a world historical changing event.
yeah,
No, yeah.
yeah. No, it is. It is. It
Yeah,
is.
that's why I'm saying, like, if you're listening to this right now, vote for Farage and Le Pen, please. Like, stuff the ballot boxes, please. I'm accelerationist for the news. Like I need more news to talk about. We're trying to make this a regular series, so please, accelerate the world. You know,
Exactly.
Israel, please strike Corsica. That little island off of Italy. Please strike that one.
Yeah, and
Just like for me. Just a little bit. They're basically Arab, so go ahead. That might be
maybe just
that might be the worst thing I've ever said.
yeah, Israel should just start. Should have. I think like the real Holy Land is actually in Turkish Cyprus, and so
Yeah.
they
Yeah,
should
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's inside. No, 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 no. The real Holy Land is
New Jersey.
New Jersey. Yeah, 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 yeah. Off the highway. Just start striking that place. Honestly, I wouldn't mind a couple of Israeli strikes on New Jersey. Even not
Yeah,
too bad. Yeah. Well, anyways, yeah. Wrapping it up. We might have to cut out that last part. I'm not gonna lie. That was pretty insane. But I think the fans will understand. I think the followers will understand.
that's true. That's true.
Yeah. Well, yeah. See you later, bro.
All right. See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Pokepreet podcast. If you want to support our podcast, you can always head down to our Patreon where you can get episodes up to a month early. Workers of the world unite. Long live the immortal science of Marxist Leninism. Thank you.